Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Citizen Representatives, a podcast. I'm Tyler with my friend Adam here. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Tyler. We're back for another week.
Another week. We've done two in a row. We're just getting started. So really
Nobody's
appreciate
beaten
Adam.
us yet? Our sponsors haven't pulled their money.
The sponsors preemptively pulled their money, so we never had sponsors. To start with, they saw what we were trying to do. They said no, and so we've never actually had a sponsor yet.
That's the highest compliment I can think of. So,
we haven't been booted from any sort of platform. Of course, we're barely on any platforms. Nobody's heard of us yet. So you kind of have to have a name for yourself before you get canceled. So the goal is to become well known enough to have people think about us even being canceled. So what do you think about that?
Let's do it. Let's get known.
So we were just ribbing each other. Adam is a couple years older than I. We were talking about baseball cards and things of that nature. And anyway, good times. I started following. This is the weirdest things. Normally you follow teams that are in your state, but I became a fan of the Minnesota Twins because I was telling Adam this story, because when I became interested in baseball, the Twins had happened to win the World Series the year before. And so that's just, and then my favorite player was Kirby Puckett. Some of you may have heard of the name, but he was a guy, I probably only watched one or two games in his whole career because we didn't have cable. There was really no ESPN for us back in the day, but I did follow his box score all the time, and when they were in the playoffs in 91, I did watch all those. But how about you, Adam?
Player. Great man. I wasn't a fan of the Twins, and when you're from Utah, it doesn't matter what your team is because there is no baseball team here, and the Diamondbacks that were a little further south from you weren't even in existence yet. So yeah, no.
Well, I actually think I was a Dodgers fan before, because I have family from LA. My first baseball hat was a Dodgers hat, and so I played Little League for a couple years, and then we really stunk one year, and I said I'm done with baseball. I started playing basketball. So
yeah,
I didn't go back to baseball. So.
Yeah, baseball's kind of a really young kid sport, right? That's when I was passionate about it. It was like the first sport before anything else. But I was a Red Sox fan in the American League, and then a Dodgers fan in the National League. So yeah, a lot of pain in watching the Red Sox early on, but they finally got it. So. It was good.
They've come around. They've successfully.
They navigated.
Was it them that had the curse, or was it the Cubs, or did they both have kind of?
They both had the curse. Yeah. No, the curse of the Bambino was the Red Sox, and then the curse of the goat was the Chi Sox, or the Cubbies. Sorry.
So they both successfully removed the curse from themselves. So
they did.
Congratulations to them. And now, of course, we don't follow any sports really because it's too political. Except for Adam was saying he tends to follow hockey a little bit more because they're a little bit more blue collar maybe.
NHL and European soccer. So.
European soccer. Okay.
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to call it football?
Barça. Yeah, football.
Anyway, fun. I did play soccer in high school, but I wasn't like that good. And now, speaking of being not that good, I know we're getting off topic here from what we're supposed to be talking about. I was watching some footage of me play sophomore basketball, and I'm not nearly as good. I wasn't nearly as good as I thought I was. Let's put it that way. It was kind of embarrassing to watch, but I did score a basket, so there's that. I think it was just edited. They videoed the whole game and then just condensed it down to about a 30-second clip where I did score. So,
basketball was my favorite sport growing up. I liked them all, football, basketball, but basketball was the one that I was passionate about. So
It's too bad that the sports have tended to turn, well, this is not just the case with sports. There's so many things that have just become political all the time.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of talk about some of the implications of that a little bit later on. But before we do, Adam and I are going to talk about, well, mainly Adam. Adam's going to talk about some of the kind of side projects that we're working on, some of the groups that we are members of on Facebook. And so Adam, would you mind talking about the Project Goodwill for a minute?
Sure. So a group of us got together. An original draft was given of the Declaration of Goodwill. It's pretty non-denominational, non-partisan. It's just a very, I think, all-embracing document that pleads for, for people to have goodwill towards each other. We see so much anger and hatred, and you used to battle at the dinner table over a little bit over politics, but it was more religion and different issues and your favorite teams, and now it seems like every politics. Some people just feel like you can't be friends with people if they don't have the correct beliefs. And so this document was drafted, and we kind of tried to make it very universal and appealing to people all over the earth. I mean, how can anybody not embrace feelings of goodwill? And it's an interesting.
I think it depends on the moment, because we asked someone that I know to do it, and we caught them at a bad time, and they said, "I don't believe in goodwill."
Are you going to call them?
I'm not going to say who, because the person was joking. But
yeah.
No,
I mean, and it's a good reminder to all of us, because I think about my rhetoric in my daily life, and I'm certainly, it's easy to look at the television and see some pundit or some politician or some sports star or anybody, or even the neighbor down the street or whatever you see, or somebody, work companion, and they say something and you go, what a moron. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do, is just dismiss people that out of hand, and not judge them based on their character and the content of their actions every day. So this is an appeal to the world, and especially to our leaders, since they are the focal point of what societies are supposed to be looking forward to and emulating in our own lives. So it's a call to action from political leaders, from the media, from anybody with any sort of influence over the lives of what we would term the common folk, to really tone down some of the rhetoric. And it doesn't mean you can't be, we can't have sarcasm, and we can't jab and, have some fierce debate. But let's continue the debate, right, and not just try and shut people down with, calling people idiots and morons. And so we've drafted this declaration. We have a page, a group page on Facebook. You can look us up. It's Declaration of Goodwill. Like us, follow us. Contribute anything you have to say about, goodwill. We have an Instagram page, which also is, I think, Declaration of Goodwill. But we're going to do some video projects to try and advertise a little bit and emphasize how important this is, maybe now more than ever. And we hope to see a good response from people and gain followers and try and influence the people of influence, because ultimately we have to hold those people accountable.
And if you don't, you're a Nazi sympathizer.
There you go, Tyler. That's the idea.
No, that's what we're trying to counter. You see this all the time. We just had the CPAC, which I heard was going on. I'm not involved. I didn't watch any of it, but I did hear that part of the stage was shaped as a form of a really obscure Nazi symbol. And from what they tell me, it was totally unintended. Nobody knew what these Nazi symbols were except for like historians. And of course, now all these blue check marks on Twitter are calling the people who are involved in this Nazi sympathizers. And so the Project Goodwill is to try to help not call people Nazis when they're not Nazis. That's part of it. We want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And, that just seems like a no-brainer to me. Why do we want to increase the rancor and the hostility when we can tone it down?
Absolutely.
So we have another group that's kind of related. It's called the Keys of Knowledge. Would you talk about that for a moment, Adam?
Sure. So Tyler and I both follow an author. I've been reading a lot of his material for probably 16, 17 years. Tyler, roughly the same, maybe not quite as long.
No, about 10.
And that's kind of how that's really actually how Tyler and I came to know each other, through online discussion. And we've even gone to some author conferences where his name is Joseph J. Dewey. We call him JJ. And he's just written a lot of different stuff. Most of it is metaphysical in nature, but he does delve into all different topics. Political from a principle standpoint. He tries not to be too divisive, but I think he's actually a pretty good example of this attitude of goodwill, and just being able to argue on point. Being able to discuss issues and stay on topic, discuss policy without getting involved in emotional insulting, and it's one of the things he actually emphasizes. So we've the Keys of Knowledge. Actually, we kind of the nickname of the group is the Keysters, which was kind of just making fun of ourselves. Keysters being the derriere, but I think it's just a good discussion group for people that want to discuss anything, the big picture, from why we're here, what we're doing here on Earth, to the smaller issues of how we go about trying to make this world a better place, and it's pretty inclusive of all different. You don't have to be of a particular belief to go there and investigate a little bit or look at different ideas. You certainly don't have to buy into anything. This is not there's no strict code of conduct for what you must do in order to be on the Keys of Knowledge. You just simply have to be fairly polite and discuss topics that are of interest to the best of your ability. There's no other requirements. So anyway, it's a good forum for anybody that's curious. We have a lot of different backgrounds in life, and we go through a lot of different things, and I think it's important to always have a curious attitude and always question and investigate, and even question and definitely question our own beliefs, our own attitudes, which hopefully is what Tyler and I are trying to do here on this podcast. I don't think we're not open to changing our minds on any topic, including those we're going to discuss tonight. So anyway.
I think it's important to have an open mind, and part of the reason that I am part of that group is because it helps me to recognize true principles and help me apply those to life. I thought I had a good foundation, and I do. I have a very good foundation, and reading the author's material has really helped me to understand kind of some of the underlying principles behind the principles. Sometimes you think you know something, and then when you start peeling at that onion, you actually don't know that much about it, and it's really helped me to understand some of those things. we have now the citizen representatives comes from J.J. Dewey's book, Molecular Politics, Fixing America. Now, J.J., he's used this molecular kind of keyword as a way to talk about other things. And so, Adam, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment just to talk about kind of that word and how it may apply to some of these things we're talking about.
The molecular principle you're talking about.
Yes.
So if you look at the premise for his treatise on the molecular relationship, he calls it, is that if you look at things from the greatest in the universe, from the smallest in the universe to the greatest, you see continual pairings going on. You might call them even marriages, where different energies are coming together, positive and negative forces. Like at the molecular level, you have atoms that combine into, and even beyond that, if you went back to quarks and whatever they've been able to find before that. But you have all of these microscopic elements coming together and combining to create greater life forms. The water molecule, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. By themselves, 2 hydrogen atoms are nothing, and an oxygen atom is nothing compared to what they become as the element of water, as we know. So everything, we always see this combining of forces throughout the universe at very low levels. And these microscopic relationships or marriages of atoms and molecules to create cells, and cells to create different structures that we see about us in the physical universe today. All of these things are, everything's building to something greater. Everything always becomes something greater than it is. But at the very base level, they operate on almost autopilot. They're very, they've discovered a level of perfection within themselves that allows them to, they just go about. Our bodies don't have to worry about the carbon atoms in our body, making sure they work. I don't even have to worry about my arm most of the time unless it gives me pain. These things just operate because they've had eons of time of evolution in order to adapt and to become the perfected units that they are. And humans have done the same, right? We, in very primitive times, we were very, society was very chaotic, but we began gathering, and we realized that family units kind of helped keep us together, and then we joined as clans, and eventually as kingdoms, and none of this was perfect, but every evolutionary step was a little bit better, even with all of its imperfections. And eventually we are where we are today, which can look very chaotic, but if you stand back and look at the beauty of how it's evolved and how coming together as nations and coming together hopefully as one world, as countries begin to cooperate and as nations stop eating themselves alive from within, you're going to have these greater and greater units. And where do we go from there? I mean, if things have perfected on the lower level, then we can assume and hope that things will continue to progress and become perfected on a much higher level, and that humans have only begun to just scratch the surface of our potential, which gives me and should give us all a lot of hope that we have another evolutionary step to take. And part of that is this molecular relationship where people begin to really join together, to be of goodwill, to see past differences of opinion, to see that personality is merely personality. It's just a vehicle for what we need to do on this earth. But that where we're really going, we really are one. We're all, to be super cliche and cheesy, we're all in this together. And if 2 atoms can combine and create a molecule that is infinitely more powerful than the atoms by themselves, what can a group of humans combine in purpose towards the higher good of the planet. What can they create? What can they become? And I'm not talking about anything mystical or spooky. I'm just talking about a higher form of evolution that really takes us forward and drives humanity where I think, all of us want to go: left, right, up, down, sideways, brown, black, white, speckled. All of us want to have happiness and peace. And so that's what this treatise talks about, but it does so. I've given you the 70,000 foot level. JJ really goes into a lot of detail, and I'm sorry to take up so much time, but it's
No. Now you know why I have Adam on, because he's able to expound on things that I can't put together. I read all these things. I read most of the things that Adam has read, and I'm not able to put them into the same terms that he's able to do. Part of what this molecular kind of catchphrase is that JJ uses is coming together to make something bigger from the smaller parts and to make it better. And part of what I don't call it this, but the molecular politics, I call it citizen representatives. That's just the name that I've given the idea, is that we come together as people to vote on bills, to elect people, and to basically become representatives ourselves, to become bigger participants in the world of politics. I think that so many of us have become turned off to the idea that we really have any say in what is going on in the world. We tend to, and that's just kind of human nature. When things are going wrong and we see that they're going wrong, we tend to not want to take responsibility for that and just say, "Oh man, things are really screwed up, and there's nothing I can do." And that's where I think that if you have that idea and that mentality, I think you're wrong. I think you can make a difference. I think that if you do have goodwill, if you treat your neighbor right, if you treat people how you want to be treated, and to use a term from Taleb, Nassim Taleb, he says, "Don't treat others how you don't want to be treated." So if you don't want to be treated a certain way, don't treat others a certain way. It's kind of a different take on the golden rule. The golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated. Well, another part of that is don't treat others how you don't want to be treated. And anyway, that's part of what we're doing here today. Part of what Adam said, coming together to make something more perfect and better. Not to get into religion at all, but when Jesus came, even if you just believe in him as a historical figure, many believe that he was the forebearer, the originator of this kind of molecular relationship, because he was able to bring together several people, the 12 and others, who came together to become something bigger than themselves. And we're the citizen representatives. It's not a religion. We're not religious in as far as the organization goes, but we do follow principles. And as you see, Adam and I tend to draw on things that we've learned from our backgrounds to help guide us through knowing how to treat others and how to be better people. And part of what we're doing is to do that. And so anyway, again, Adam, I appreciate you contributing that explanation on molecular principle, on kind of what we're doing. And again, the citizen representatives is coming together as people in a district and a state to elect people. We're trying to gain a better hand in what happens in our politics and in the country and in our state and in our community. Part of what we did last time was we answered a few questions. I did receive a few more. I just wanted to clarify some of the things the questions that I've received. So there's still some kind of trepidation. There's still some kind of hesitation toward the idea of the system that we're coming we're bringing to light and bringing out there. There's a hesitation using technology to do this, because we never know with technology how things are going to happen. I don't know how to write code. I don't know how to read code. Adam, maybe you're able to do that. I'm not able to do that. And
Definitely
so we
not
see,
able to do that.
no. So there's this hesitation to use technology, and I completely understand that. We saw with the election, a lot of people were accusing some of these voting companies of manipulating the votes behind the scenes, and I don't know that that's true. I don't know that it's false, but there is the accusation that those things were happening. With the way that we're trying to set this up, now again, this is all in the future. I don't have any sort of program. I don't have this set up. This is not something that has been created by me anyway yet. But so we're talking in pure hypotheticals here of how I envision the system to come about. So if somebody says, I don't do apps. So I'm assuming what that means is they don't want to download something directly onto their phone. Maybe they're talking about something else. You don't have to vote on your phone. The way that I envision this being is you would be able to vote on a website. Now, when I'm talking about voting, I'm talking about you being a citizen representative voting on bills that your representative would vote on. I don't really have any interest in, and I don't think it's a good idea yet to vote for actual, like in the presidential elections or for senators or for representatives online. I don't trust any systems to do that yet. That may happen in the future with kind of the ideas that we're putting forth with blockchain and public ledgers and things like that. But a lot needs to happen before that happens. So what I'm talking about specifically are votes that take place to inform representatives and senators how to vote. And so we would need to be able to vote online. I don't know that it would necessarily have to be on an app, but it would be online. We're not going to be able to have people come in to a location every time and do an in-person vote every time. We're going to have some trust. We're going to have the main part of this where I can see an issue being is in the registration process, because we want to make sure that is as transparent as possible, providing that we protect people's identities. So that's not available to any outside any outside people kind of hacking in or doing anything like that. But we would need a strong input process and to get people so that they're registered to vote. After that, I would want the code to be as transparent as possible so that anyone who knows how to code or knows how to read, I mean, I'm assuming that if you know how to code, you can read the code. That anyone along those lines would be able to come in and say, well, you're open here for vulnerability, or someone came in here and edited this or altered that. But I want that to be as open and transparent as possible so that there's no questions, or very few questions anyway, about the security and the verifiability, if that's a word. Is that a word, Adam? of the votes and the system. I'm probably going to have a lot of those words that I just kind of seem to make up. Adam and I both know Spanish, or at least we used to, and so some of the words that they come back and forth and they seem to make sense in one language and not another, but that's neither here nor there. So do you have any comment on that, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, we can dive in, and I need to refresh on blockchain a little bit, but my understanding is that, in essence, these transactions are already encrypted, so they're supposed to be uncorruptible. Now, that doesn't mean that people haven't been able to get in to some of this code from what I've read, but it's so difficult to do that it's almost not even worth people's time. Now, don't take me flat out for that as being, an absolute truth. I mean, I'm sure there are vulnerabilities, but that's the idea behind blockchain, is that each transaction is encrypted, can't be corrupted. And to try and corrupt it, you have to corrupt all these other nodes of operation that are out there, because the code's not just going to this one node, it's going to all these other nodes. And so it becomes an incredible task for somebody to try and hack into all those different veins of and pathways. Is that your understanding too?
Yeah. So you're more involved in the technological side of this because of your job. I'm just an observer. I've done some research on things. So when you say the word encryption, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm not because of my job, just because I spent several months reading about it, but it's not fresh on my brain. I do remember some commentary talking about some potential vulnerabilities, but again, the overwhelming theme came back from the idea of blockchain was that it was such a task to try and go and tackle all these different veins of information being, that are channeled out there, that it's just not even worth somebody's time. Now, that's probably an area we need to dig into a little more, and maybe interview some people that are a little more knowledgeable about that can talk about some of those potential vulnerabilities, or at least give us some perspective on just how difficult it is to penetrate and to corrupt the blockchain. Because that's the whole reason the blockchain exists, is to be uncorruptible.
Yeah, so we have the word encryption, which sometimes means, well, there's probably really only one definition, but kind of what the blockchain is secure. I think that's what you mean when you say encrypted. Is that kind of the word that you mean, or are you also meaning kind of obscure, because the blockchain is intended to be kind of a public ledger, because these transactions, well, you're not able to edit the transactions when they come in. I think that's maybe what you mean when you say
that's
encrypted.
The encryption part of it. Yeah.
The transactions are not able to be edited unless you have a certain percentage of the network.
Unless you can edit all the
transactions
going to each node, right?
Yes, which is basically impossible. You'd have to have a 51% basically computing power of the network, 51% total of the network, to be able to even think about it. And then if you did that, then the other 49% would say, "What are you doing?" And then the whole network that there would be confidence lost in the whole network. So it wouldn't behoove anyone to do that, because unless they were bad actors, let's put it that way. So what we're trying to get at is we're trying to take out the human element of the actual system that is the process of voting. Not the votes themselves. You are able to make your own vote. You will do that. But from the time that you submit your vote, we want to have 100% confidence that that vote is a valid vote, that there's only one vote per person per bill or whatever, and that people can very easily and quickly verify those votes and have confidence in them. So there's the other question of the human element, and that's where we want to take out the human element in the actual code, in the actual processing of the votes, because we know that, well, we don't know. There were thousands and thousands of allegations of impropriety during the 2020 election, and whether those are true or not, I don't know. I'm not a researcher. All I can do is tell you that there were things that were alleged, and part of what we're trying to do is to avoid those questions altogether. And I think this is a good way to do this. Now, again, Adam and I are not programmers. We're kind of looking at this from, I would like it to do these main things, and then we kind of turn it over to programmers and developers who would take it from there and really kind of sculpt it to do what we want to do.
And to be able to articulate for us what it's doing security-wise, right? So that we can give people confidence in that system.
Yeah, we want to be able to say exactly what it's doing, put it in layman's terms. This is what it's doing. This is what it's not doing. We have these, hopefully in the future, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different computers and locations that are coming together to secure this network. Now, it may be on the Bitcoin network itself. It may not be. I don't know. That's yet to be determined. But it will be, as I see it in the future, something based on the blockchain. So let's move on. Unless you have anything else to add to that, Adam.
No, that's good.
So let's talk about baking cakes for a minute. Now, this may come out of left field. Speaking of baseball, this isn't really prevalent, or the people have heard of the story of the gay couple. I think this happened numerous times. The gay couple goes to a baker and they say, "Bake me this cake," and the baker says, "I don't want to bake you a cake." And so the gay couple sues the baker. Am I getting this right, Adam? Is that the main
That's
parts of the story?
Those are some of the stories I've heard. Yeah.
Okay, so we're trying to figure out who's right in this and who's wrong. How are we to apply this? How are we to learn? Are there any principles behind this? Are the gay couple's rights being violated? Are the baker's rights being violated? What I am proposing is and you'll see this come together as we talk about it over these next few minutes. I want to see someone propose a bill to protect certain people's rights or abilities to act under their own conscience. So, and I want to call it something along the lines of, "Bake me a cake, bigot." That's been a phrase that has been bandied about and used, because people say you have no right to tell the baker, or excuse me, you have no right to tell the gay couple that you cannot bake them a cake. And I was trying to understand and say, yeah, should he or shouldn't he, or do they have the right to do this? What was your initial take on all of this, Adam, as it was coming, as these things were coming out?
Well, I mean, I'm a live and let live kind of guy. So one thing is as the stories are presented versus what the actual truth behind the story is, right? And I think a lot of these people didn't have particular objections to the people being gay. My understanding was that actually, if they'd come into their store, they would have been happy to let them purchase a cake, because most people aren't announcing, "Hey, I'm gay. Hey, I'm straight. Can I buy your cake?" Right? These were specific requests for catering to weddings. And so, reading later on, I mean, there was an interesting point in the article that you sent me, that there was a difference between on-premise vending of your, like a grocery store certainly can't deny any person from purchasing in this country. I mean, that's just for reasons of religious belief or some other reason, but
or political belief.
Yeah. There you go. And so you have the argument, well, as a private company, can they do that? But their goods and services are for the public domain. I mean, I guess there are arguments to be made there. So aside from, first of all, I don't have a problem selling a cake to anybody. And I don't have a problem catering anybody's wedding if I were a baker. But, just for the record. But do people with real religious conviction have a right to say no? And I think the article made a good argument for, if it's in your store and somebody comes in and buys a cake, go ahead, knock yourself out, buy a cake. I don't care what your beliefs are, what your practices are. You should be able to buy that cake. And the compromise comes in the catering of the business, because now you're in a situation where you go off-site, you take your cake to an event, and you could be perceived as endorsing this event. And I guess if some people had a problem with that, then I could understand their wanting to say to, in this case, a gay couple, I really don't feel good about doing that. I would prefer you went elsewhere. So there were a lot of different arguments made. I certainly feel like that's a reasonable one to be able to say, if you don't want to cater an event, don't cater it. I mean, if you could think of numerous groups and organizations, and you have to be consistent no matter what, right? If a baker was asked to bake a cake for, we saw this recently at CPAC, right? Hyatt got a whole lot of crap for hosting guests of CPAC.
And Hyatt is the hotel that they had.
A hotel chain, yeah. So should they say no? Should they say yes? And why should they say, why should they be able to, I mean, certainly they can deny those people, but, how do you square that with, a couple or a baker that doesn't want to bake a cake for a wedding, for religious beliefs. So, I think.
So let me set this up a little more. Go.
Yeah.
Did you have a final
No,
thing?
I mean, I'm just. You threw it to me,
Okay.
so I was just meandering.
So the article that I sent him. Now, again, I'm going to say a word here. Pure Mormonism. It's the Pure Mormonism blog. We're looking at principles here. That's part of the deal. And the article is called "The Real Threat to Traditional Marriage." And we're not going to really get into that specifically, but we're talking about the principle of discrimination, and when you're able to and when you're not able to discriminate against someone. I don't necessarily endorse discrimination. I think you should do everything to you should serve anyone that you want to. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to read some of these things. So the author's name is Rock Waterman, and I'm going to talk about some of the things here. It says, about 25 years ago, I found myself sitting in a hotel lobby having a conversation with a man in the chair next to me. In the course of the conversation, I discovered he was an author of a book I happened to own. So it turned out I knew something about him. He was a rights advocate who had something of a reputation as a rabble-rouser. Although by this time I was fairly well versed in the concepts of natural law, I was unclear how natural law rights can be extended into the public arena without interfering with the autonomy of others. In the course of our conversation, I got my basic education in civil rights. My new friend Des told me about an experience he had the previous week at a movie theater. He and a friend had set up a table in a shopping mall where they were handing out brochures and soliciting people to sign petitions. After a couple hours, Des decided to call it a day, stuffed his few remaining brochures in his back pocket, and went across the hall to the Cineplex to watch a movie. He had some time to kill before the movie started, so he bought himself a tray of cheesy nachos and sat down to eat. Not long after, he was approached by a uniformed cop who was accompanied by the theater manager. The cop told Des the manager wanted him to leave. Why? The manager replied, I don't want you disturbing the other customers. How am I disturbing the other customers? I saw you outside handing out those brochures, the manager said, pointing to the brochures jutting out of Des's back pocket. I don't want you handing them out in here. I'm not handing out brochures in here, Des responded. I'm eating a tray of nacho cheese chips, and then I'm going to watch a movie. I'm here because you invited me here. That one surprised the manager. I never invited you here, he turned to the cop, and I want you to make him leave. Well, the long story short, the cop didn't make Des leave. The cop was the one who left, because this cop understood why Des had a right to be there. As Des patiently explained to the manager, the theater had indeed invited him there by placing a public advertisement in the paper. Further, the theater held itself out as a place where the public could purchase entertainment. The venue was open for business at the time Des had arrived, and he had paid for his ticket. So Des had as much right as any other member of the public to be present, and to be served in the same manner as any other customer. So this gets to the kind of the distinction between some things. And Adam alluded to it. when you offer something, and I'm going to try to crystallize it as best I can. When you offer something that is the same for everyone, meaning it's something on the shelf or it's the same exact thing that you offer someone on a website, it's the same membership, it's the same this, it's the same that. There's no difference in what you're offering to someone, then you are not able to discriminate who you offer that to. Now, Adam alluded to that with somebody going grocery shopping. How can somebody deny someone's service to go into a grocery store? The line is drawn when what you're offering requires some creative talent or some creativity by you. So this is what Adam was talking about in the difference between buying a cake off the shelf and having something catered. Because having, if you have 10 cakes on the shelf like they do at Dairy Queen has no right to deny service to anyone who wants to buy those cakes. Now, unless they don't have a shirt on, or unless, whatever the case may be. But if they're just, if they're not causing any problems, and that could be, they have a right to buy that. Now, on the other hand, if somebody decides to cater something and they have to use their creativity and their talents to do that, then they do have the right to say, I don't want you to, I would rather not participate in this. Now, that may not be a good business decision for that person, but that's not our call. And so what I'm trying to do is to apply this principle to the cancel culture and social media companies and Amazon and all of these other companies that now think that they have the ability to just not give service to somebody because they believe a certain way. And that is wrong. In my personal opinion, I think that's very wrong. So you have these social media companies like Facebook and Twitter and Google and YouTube. What they're offering, unless I'm mistaken, technologically, your account is the same as mine. Now, you may post things that are different, but the accounts that are offered are the same for everyone. And they are using kind of these nebulous terms of service to kick people off of these things because they're violating these terms of service. Now, I understand if they do that for, say, child pornography. I'm for removing that kind of content and for not allowing people to do that. For anything that is illegal, I'm for not allowing those people to advertise or to have an account soliciting or promoting things that are illegal. Now, I may be wrong in that kind of line of thinking, but I think that's where we can kind of look at it. Twitter, people say things that are offensive, but those things are not against the law. Right now, you're seeing a lot of people being canceled for things that they say on Twitter and on Facebook that 5 years ago were either common knowledge or was the prevailing kind of truth or the mindset of people at the time. That is definitely true with things like, for instance, right now, there are things that you can't say without fear of getting canceled. And some of those things are if you say anything against someone who's transgender, someone will call you transphobic and try to get you banned. Now, you could be talking about the science behind, well, let's look at some of the research behind when somebody decides to change their sex that they were born with. Now, I'm not advocating for this or against this. I'm just talking about the idea that we can't talk about these things right now. A large percentage of those people who have the gender reassignment surgery come to regret it afterward. Well, we're not allowed to talk about that. There are people talking about allowing children, minors, giving them the ability to have hormone blockers and basically stunt their sexual development, which can be a permanent thing. If you block some of these things while they're in process and while they're during the natural time that they would do it, you may be forever altering that person's physiology. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I'm saying that we're not allowed to talk about that. And so part of what I'm getting at is if you're Facebook and Twitter and you're offering these things, because Twitter and Facebook gain their value by having the network of people in there. And they said, we want you to come be part of our network. And they offered that to anyone. They're not, in their advertising for these accounts, as far as I know, they're not discriminatory in that way.
Yeah. Well, and one thing they're falling back on is, this generic label of hate speech. Well, it qualifies as hate speech, but hate speech is super subjective. So if you're going to level that accusation, you better bring a good arsenal of evidence and make a really good argument in support of your assertion that it is hate speech, because a lot of times it's merely, well, we just disagree with that attitude, or you're bringing up something we consider very taboo, when actually it's, the other side may actually be presenting a mountain of evidence in support of their view. So why stop the debate? More information, more conversation is always better. If you want to counter somebody, bring a better counter argument, but continue the discussion. The way to go about this is not to shut people down out of hand and just label, well, that's just hate speech. That's too simple, and it's frankly lazy. It's just lazy. We should be willing to really dive into the conversation and have a discussion, and then let people decide which side of the argument they might lie on. And it's usually not a prison of two ideas. It's not one or the other. It's somewhere in between, right?
Yeah. So part of the argument that I'm trying to make, and I believe Adam would too, is we need to get away from this denying people service because of what they believe, or if they're not doing anything that's against the law, you need to give them the latitude to do that. Amazon has removed books from stores because they don't agree with the ideas in those books. Well, of course, now they're coming for Huck Finn, they're coming for 1984, they're coming for
Isn't that amazing?
Gone with the Wind. Yeah, I know, it's pretty ironic, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
And
everybody read 1984 if you haven't read it. Please read it over and over again. It's a painful book to read, but it is so insightful.
My son just got the hardcover and he was so excited.
Nice.
So part of the foundation behind this, when you can and when you can't deny people service, is this. If your quote-unquote right requires an action or a payment or money on my part, then that's not an actual right. Okay, so the couple that decided they wanted to force this baker to provide them a service. If that right, if your so-called right to have that requires me to do something out of my way to use my creativity and to do things, then that's not an actual right. And this kind of principle can be applied to so many other things. And we will do that in the future. It can apply to healthcare. It can be applied to other so-called rights that are out there. And we will eventually get there. But this is part of what I'm would like to focus on, and we've already kind of hammered the point, is if your so-called right requires me to pay something or do something, then that's not a right. You don't have any right to do that because you're coercing me to do that. Now, along those same lines, there's kind of I don't know if it's novel or if it's kind of an established kind of thing. The Schoolhouse Writes on Twitter says, here's a clever compelled speech reply that persuaded the federal court today to declare that our First Amendment claim is likely to succeed, paving the way for a trial on the merits in April. So the story behind this is a person or a group of people, they're against the critical rights theory. It's being pushed in school, and they're being...
Race theory.
Did I say rights? Critical race theory, sorry. Critical race theory, and which basically says it's trying to get you to feel guilty for being a particular color, and to say everyone else has been oppressed. They're trying to get you to make. They're trying to. How do I phrase this? Trying to get you to make you feel guilty for being who you are. And so in the schools, they were forcing this critical race theory upon this particular set of people. And they're saying, defendants violated these fundamental principles by requiring plaintiff to unlearn his current beliefs and values and compel him to affirm another set of beliefs about highly contested issues of race, sexuality, religion, privilege, and oppression. So this kind of goes to the compelled speech that we were talking about in the baker. The gay couple was trying to get the baker to compel him to do something that he didn't want to do or say or produce. And so the arguments in this case are that the school is forcing this kid to go against something that he believes, and they're forcing him into basically compelled speech. Now, interestingly, my daughter has had a run-in with her teacher lately. It's Black History Month, which I don't have a problem with. I don't have a problem learning about Black history at all. But she was forced to watch and comment on several videos that basically, if you watch them, they are racist in their nature. It's just kind of a reverse racism. They're instead of what people normally think of, white people being racist against black people, it was other people of different races making my daughter feel that she was inferior, that she was kind of an appropriator, and it was very disconcerting to watch because the arguments that the video made were comical on their face. Now, my wife is of mixed heritage. She's of mixed race, and so this was, and I'm quarter Hispanic. It was kind of interesting to see that they were trying to put these things in terms to make us feel guilty. And my daughter was forced to write articles and things on this video, and so we wrote a kind of a strongly worded letter to the teacher.
Yeah.
And the teacher apologized. I'm not sure that she had ever had that kind of pushback before, but it's just not. It doesn't have a place. We need to be able to accept people for who they are. We just need to learn to accept people and not worry about the color of their skin so much.
Well, that's one part of it. The other part of it is indoctrination versus teaching, right? That we are actually, if your assignment is geared towards stating a specific affirmation of belief or arguing for a specific issue, that's not okay in a school. The school should present that and say, hey, take a side, do you think this is valid? Do you think this is invalid? And judge the child based on the argumentation and the quality of the rhetoric in their writing, not based on their belief or their point of view. My mom taught sixth grade for umpteen years, and she was a lifelong Democrat, but she's astounded when we talk to her about some of the assignments that our kids are given these days and the way the teachers talk to the kids. My mom always brought up politics, but in a very non-partisan way. She presented both sides. Well, here's what this side believes, and I'm sure it was tainted with some, bias towards one side occasionally, but she was attempting to let the child decide, what do you decide about the issue, and not, you have to write a paper that says that critical race theory is important, and all children need to know that this country is inherently racist. That's not presenting an issue. That's just saying, hey, here's your belief, here's your commandment, go out, write it, believe it, and change your mind. And that's not okay.
Well, what's kind of puzzling to me is this is a language arts class. This is not like they're talking about history. I would assume that, let's talk about Black History Month in history class.
Yeah.
We have to bring it up in every subject, and now they're talking about math as being, if you check someone's answers, it's racist, because some of the kids did not have as privileged of a background to have a good understanding of math, and that's just weird and alien to me. That's just a weird kind of concept.
Yeah, no, I mean, as long as a language arts class should be about how well you made your argument and whether or not you used good syntax and grammar and all that, right? It's not about...
Well, she's in 7th grade. I don't remember, talking about those type of things. And in 7th grade, yeah. I was so afraid of even speaking in class that's all I could think about. I don't remember critical race theory, or I don't think it even existed as at least like that.
Yeah, you didn't have to teach it the way they're coming about it these days. I mean, to understand our history and understand, the terrible forces of slavery that existed, and the Civil War that was fought over that, and then the continued racial tension, up until the passage of the civil rights legislation in the 50s and 60s. All of that brought that emotion out in me as a child, right? I mean, I had incredible sentiment towards that period of our history, and felt, these were egregious things that happened. But I was born yesterday. I'm not responsible for that because I happen to be, somebody who's purple. So it was like, just present the information, present the angst of the terrible things that happened, and you will accomplish what you want to accomplish without forcing kids into these false beliefs. I could go on, but
in future topics,
Black Lives Matter, for instance, as a theme, not as a political group. Yeah, what took you so long? I've always believed that. From the time I was in, a 6-year-old and learned about slavery. I was horrified at what happened in this country, but I also knew I wasn't responsible. Did I want to be a kind person growing up? Absolutely. It absolutely instilled that in me, and I hope I have been. But we don't need to teach this way in order to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is to be a kinder nation and judge people, as Martin Luther King said, based on the color of not on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character.
What's been so disheartening and even disconcerting is the lack of people standing up for the rights of people of a particular political persuasion right now. I'm talking, of course, about conservatives by and large. The the thought forms and the ideas on the left tend to be the ones that find purchase, or they find advocates in the media. When a conservative says, I think we should take a step back and look at this a different way. Let's look at the research, and well, you're a bigot. I don't really agree with that. And there's been a kind of a stunning lack of people standing up and proposing legislation to protect people's political beliefs. And I think that we need to have a bill that protects people with this kind of idea in mind, that if you offer something that is the same for everyone, you have to offer that to everyone. You can't deny someone service because they disagree with you politically. Because basically that's what it comes down to. They can use these weasel terms, but I think we need to craft legislation that avoids that. If you offer something that is creative, if you're a home builder, you build custom homes, and you don't want to build a home for somebody, you have every right to say, no, I'd rather not. If you are a musician and you create music for people, and you don't want to create music for for a person, you can say no, because what they would be actually requiring you to do is you're quote unquote you're doing things against their will, and that's where we should draw the line. Now, again, we can go into whether that's a good business decision or not, but that shouldn't be our concern. It should be the prerogative and the decision of the people providing that service. And so I had an idea about kind of crowdsourcing, because right now we're just starting this kind of political movement with citizen representatives. And I had an idea of coming together and crowdsourcing some money that we'd be able to put together to send an actual lobbyist to Washington or to one of these places. And so I think that this is something that we'll do. I think this is I haven't talked to Adam about this. And if I think it's very important that people stand up for this, because one of the ways that we eliminate cancel culture is make it so that people can't do that. You have to be able to offer, and if you offer something to one set of people, you have to offer it to anyone else. I've worried about using some of these services, the podcasting and the video casting. I've worried about using those, about people saying, oh, you can't use this anymore because of what you're talking about. We're not talking about anything illegal. We're just talking about politics. We have certain ideas about how things should be or how they shouldn't be, and I've worried about that. So I don't think that should be a worry for people. I don't think people should worry about their bank accounts being closed. President Trump's bank accounts were closed for what reason? Some of his bank accounts were closed because of who knows what. I mean, there are reasons, but the banks don't want to be associated with that. Well, guess what? That's too bad. You offer a service to one person, you have to offer it to everyone. Now, they may have, again, we can get into lawyer speak after that, but we can talk about that. Just in kind of wrapping up, this is something to think about in the future. Will blockchain end this cancel culture, or will it just kind of peter out on its own? What do you think, Adam?
Well, I think there's potential there for blockchain to do a lot of things, to decentralize so that you're not reliant on influence, right? Whether it comes from corporations, lobbyists and activists, government, so that you don't have this kind of intervention. But I think, one of the things, and I'm open to all parts of this debate. One thing to think about is, the knee-jerk reaction is to create more laws to counter what we see as contradicting what the Constitution actually allows for, when in fact we could simply enforce the Constitution on its own on its own merit. Because I think a lot of these things would fall into that. I think a lot of the answers to this may lie simply in the marketplace itself and demand. We need more creativity out there. People, and I think people are starting to see that. But these platforms, companies that have so much influence and power, it may take the average citizen creating alternatives where people can go and not be afraid. And it doesn't mean that it just becomes a one party company, right? The doors are still open. That company's not going to cancel anybody, right? You can, if you create an online platform for communicating and publishing your opinions, then everybody should be invited. Nobody gets canceled unless it's outright, just ridiculous or illegal. I guess illegal would be the delineation for why you might restrict content there, such as child pornography. But I think we need innovators. I think we need people to produce alternatives, and that will be the best indicator to the market of, hey, people do have alternatives. Yes, it's a huge, when you think about competing against some of these companies, it's a huge task. It seems insurmountable, but I think ultimately, for me, that's kind of the direction we may have to go.
Now, part of the power behind Bitcoin is we don't know who created it. There's a name of the Satoshi Nakamoto, I think Satoshi is what they typically call him, or her. We don't know. It could be a her, but we don't know or an it. It could have been an AI. It could have been an alien. It could have just, come from on high. We don't know. But part of the idea there is we don't know who it is, and so there's nobody that we can go and blame and say, oh well, you did this, and now we want you to change it, and there's nobody to target because it's so distributed, and the idea is being permeated and spreading everywhere of the idea of blockchain and cryptology and doing these things that it's going to take down the central banks. Now that's a whole other subject that we're not going to delve into today, but there may be always a central bank, but it's definitely putting pressure on the central banks, on currencies, on all sorts of things. And part of what you're saying, I think, is we shouldn't necessarily rely on legislation, and that's something we've alluded to before, is that we want to make it so there's enough pressure or just to change the system, or just kind of sidestep the system altogether, create something new that works, that the system would be stupid to not come along. And that's what you're seeing happen with Bitcoin itself. You're seeing all these people and banks who were bearish, and they were very anti-Bitcoin to begin with because they saw kind of how it would affect their business model. And now you're seeing them trickle in, and it's just starting right now. Now you see the big banks are saying, okay, we're opening another desk of another cryptocurrency desk, and you have to adapt or die. And I think that the Constitution is something that we need to hold as something that is very good for humanity. And if we get back to that, I think we'd be on good terms and good solid ground. We may need to do some things to push us kind of back into that realm of talking about the Constitution and following the Constitution, and that may be through the code. Part of what these Bitcoin developers talk about is to making some of these things so it's built into the code, so you're not even able to escape doing it one way or the other. And that could be part of the way that we defeat the cancel culture, is making it so I'm on the blockchain, you can't remove me now.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm naive in that. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, and that's definitely possible. But I think that I think we could have a good chance to make a difference. I kind of what I wanted to get through today was to talk about the difference between when we can and can't tell somebody no and deny someone service. Again, I'm not advocating that you necessarily deny someone service if you have the legal right to do so, but you should be able to. And any last thoughts, Adam?
No, I think we've explored quite a bit there. I have some thoughts on. We can come back to rights, natural rights, and versus legal rights sometime, and just the nature of rights. But that's a whole nother ball of wax. So maybe another time.
Yeah, we'll put it on the slate. We'll definitely get to it at some time. Maybe an alternative take, but it's definitely worth looking into. And because I'm always about looking at my core beliefs and kind of seeing if I'm basing some of those beliefs on an illusion. And I'm not saying rights are illusions, or that Adam necessarily says that, but they're, a lot of people's beliefs are built on things that just aren't true. They're an illusion.
Well, and sometimes it's just mere definition, right? But how we think about a definition can perhaps be illusion. So, yeah, it's another discussion, and just something I've always thought about, and I'm open to being corrected or have my mind changed.
Well, Adam, I appreciate your time tonight. Audience, ladies and gentlemen, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're cross-posted on Facebook and YouTube. We've got Twitter. We've got all these social places. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you find some of these concepts interesting, please share them with your friends. Please share them with your family. Again, we kind of were joking about this, about having a sponsor. Were we doing that before we were recording, about having sponsors, or was that while we were recording?
I think it was while we were recording.
Okay, I can't remember. We currently have no sponsors. We're just going at this out of our own pocket, and we would appreciate it if you thought that the content was valuable enough, that you thought that the principles and things that we're advocating are good enough we would hope that it would merit a donation on your part. If you go to citizenrepresentatives.org, you can find the donation page there. We're slowly building up a library of podcasts and of things of that nature, and we hope to be growing soon. We're novices at this. I don't really know what I'm doing. I can press record and kind of put together some video, but as far as getting that distributed out and getting people actually watching it, I'm not the best at that yet. I'm trying to be good at clickbait and things of that nature, but I don't want to mislead people about what's in a video. Anyway, we thank you for your time. Please comment, subscribe, do all those things, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, Tyler.